We start with the continued legal losing streak for Donald Trump. He's been in office 22 days, and his administration is racking up historic court losses. Yesterday, 5 different legal setbacks. That's on 5 separate issues, ranging from birthright citizenship to this ongoing clash over what judges have ruled was an unlawful attempt to freeze a wide range of federal funding. Now, the White House is fighting these injunctions, and on the one hand, they are allowed to do that, to go to court and appeal. They're calling them, quote, unlawful injunctions. Courts have the last word and say otherwise, while Trump is asking judges to do the right thing.
I think judges will have to do the right thing, really. Otherwise, you're going to have a whole big problem with the country.
Now, as is often the case, it depends what you interpret that as. Presidents often appeal judgments. They have a whole Justice Department to do that, and they can say what they think the right thing is to do. They are, after all, the sitting president. But that, coupled with what the vice president and other Trump allies have suggested darkly, that they might just defy rulings they disagree with to bring the often threatened constitutional crisis to a head, that is a problem and could put a type of pressure on the courts that is out of bounds. That could also backfire. You can imagine judges saying they're not going to be bullied into this 20 days in. Then there's the other piece we've been telling you about, how state attorneys general, representing the separate power of the states, are going at this. Just look at the multi-state lawsuits in the first term. You can see that this happens and is part of the give and take, but it has increased recently. First term Trump holding the record there, Biden coming in with a high number as we've seen some polarization and clashes increase. And now in these first couple weeks, it's grinding on. What matters more, though, even than how many cases are filed, is what happens, right? The Trump policies are getting shot down left and right by judges appointed from the left and right. In other words, the federal courts have leaned more to the right. Donald Trump, you might recall, got more judges on the Supreme Court. And even in that playing field, he is losing quickly in these initial clashes. And that's because, as legal experts and others will tell you, when things are clearly over the line or illegal under recent case law, meaning courts have already looked at the issue. They already said you can't do that. You can't rewrite the Constitution through an executive order. I told you that the day he tried to rewrite the 14th Amendment citizenship. It's since been paused on a national basis, and that's why he's running into so many problems.
Judges don't do this out of the air, and furthermore, that there has to be irreparable harm. And the notion that judges across the country have done this really should give this government pause, that they have done what they've done is not just mildly illegal, but very, very illegal. What they are doing isn't even close to legitimate.
One judge there putting the context on it, speaking to Jen Psaki. And remember, honest judges will tell you about the law. They're not just adding an opinion about whether they agree with these policies. That judge discussing how so many of these things are so wide of the law. Another judge rebuking the Trump administration for defying that court order which ended the attempted freeze on federal funding. Now, that was just yesterday. Now the heat is on whether government agencies are complying and whether Trump's attempt, along with Elon Musk, to sort of shake and threaten and disassemble the entire federal bureaucracy as we know it will work. Now, there are problems here if you judge by law, facts, and precedent. It does not mean that we are yet at the constitutional crisis boiling point. And we're going to get into that tonight. I'm going to always show you what's going on. I'm not going to minimize problems, but we're not quite at the 10. Here's where we are at. FEMA, of course, the key safety agency, has one top official reportedly demanding people defy the court order, basically telling the staff to still freeze funding. We have health staffers who are banned from issuing most grants based on a written directive and reports of a Monday meeting. Over at Interior, they're telling people that climate money is still frozen. And at another health agency, there's been a warning that Trump's orders could result in delays or rejections of payments. The states have their own intelligence, their own information, and they say they've been told most of this climate funding is just paused.
Multiple states, including Colorado, reported being denied access to federal funds.
In Massachusetts alone, he says $316 million in climate-related funding remains frozen.
Farmers across the country and here in Maine are experiencing funding roadblocks due to politics.
Some farmers tell us they are being directly impacted by President Donald Trump's federal funding freeze.
Medical research done here in Colorado on everything from Alzheimer's to cancer is now at risk as the Trump administration tries to strip away tens of millions of dollars in federal funding.
That's what we're learning from a variety of sources, from the formal federal directives and the reporting out of Washington, where a lot of these agencies are, of course, headquartered, out to the states, where, as I mentioned, you have clashes and lawsuits, and also the trickle-down effects of all this. At a policy level, we talked law, and I'll return to it, but at a policy level, this is what happens when you make these big changes. And in states, red, purple, and blue, if you keep gutting people's funds, particularly in an intemperate, almost rash, unpredictable manner, and the farmers are hurt and the scientists are hurt, and before you know it, the schools are hurt and the families are hurt, that will play out over time. And there will be a debate over whether that's good policy. Second is the baseline, the Constitution and the rule of law, and the efforts to use this and other clashes, which, remember, Donald Trump, you could say he ran on certain claims about the government, but this thing, this level of cuts, this automatic, without even involving his Republican colleagues on the Hill or the past laws that have already been put on the books, and then doing it through his billionaire friend who's not even in the cabinet, won't even say to you, the taxpayer, that he'll pass any of the normal ethical and anti-corruption screening that is involved for every other cabinet member. This thing isn't what he campaigned on, and whether it is ultimately long-term lawful to freeze the funding this way, that's the big debate right now, because the early judges, I'm not going to tell you what the Supreme Court will do in the future, but the early judges have said, no, if you want to cut funding, you have to do it going forwards, not backwards. This ain't Minority Report, Tom Cruise, you know, if you know the movie. You can't go backwards in time and cancel what the Congress already did under law. And second, most of this stuff, you can't override what judges say. If they say the money is freed up, well, in virtually all circumstances, it is then freed up. So why, as I just showed you, are some of these folks at least courting or trying to ramp up to that constitutional crisis that we may not have yet hit?